So I guess this is what we're talking about with college football now, is the fact that the Longhorn mascot has been banned on the sidelines. And the reason that they've been citing for the SEC championship game and for a couple of the college football playoff games is, look, we just don't have the room on the sideline. Now, look, I can understand, Longhorn fan, why you're upset. If you're going to do this and we got to ban everybody, we got to make it fair. Look, your Longhorn mascot on the sideline is not going to dictate whether or not you win a game of football. Let's just be clear. I understand it's cool. It's a part of the tradition, all that stuff. You get to watch him run after every score and all those good things. I get it. Celebrations, it's all a big part of it. It's all a part of the pageantry and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's just, to me, not really a big deal. If I'm being honest, it's just not a thing. And it's not something that I think we really need to worry too much about. I think you have bigger fish to fry because you've already lost a game against Georgia, and everybody's saying you haven't played anybody. In the one game where you played somebody, you lost. So if I'm Texas fan, if I'm Texas Longhorn athlete, I am focused on beating Georgia. I'm not worried about if the Longhorn is on the sideline or not. I'm just keeping it a buck. It's not a big deal to me. You have bigger things that are on your plate right now because, let's be clear, if you lose, and I mean this, you might be ranked number 2 right now, but you are risking not being in the college football playoff. Why? Because the committee, look, let's be very honest here. The committee knew exactly what they were doing and why I knew they were going to do it when they hung Alabama around the 12, 13, 14 spot. I knew it was going to happen, and lo and behold, they were number 13. Why? Because they were waiting for somebody to slip up so that way they can incorporate them. And now that a couple of slip-ups have happened, they moved Alabama so far up that there's literally no getting them out now. In fact, they can only logically move up from here. Let that sink in. And the committee wants to play stupid with everybody and pretend like they didn't know what they were doing, when in reality they are acting like MMA promoters, like they're Dana White or something, trying to create the best possible matchup in order to boost their ratings, aka a big money fight. Come on, man. Didn't everybody hear the guys at ESPN? Ooh, Notre Dame, Alabama. Not because that would be such a good game this season, but because it's Notre Dame and Alabama. We are literally talking about brand recognition here. These are football decisions that should be made, but they're not. They are making financial decisions and not football ones. And that is the reality of it. And now, because they've done what they've done with Alabama, they will be justified to a lot of people if Texas loses that game. Because that's only going to spring Georgia forward. That's only going to make sure that Alabama stays in. Potentially, you're going to move Texas out, but even then, you probably end up with at least 3 SEC teams. You could potentially move in Ole Miss from there because, Ole Miss, they've got, the win over Georgia. Look, this is one of those things where the committee right now has set this up beautifully. They were playing the game all along. This was chess to them and not checkers. And all of you bought it hook, line, and sinker, thinking that because Alabama lost to Vanderbilt, doesn't matter that they lost to Georgia State to the committee, their loss to OU, it doesn't matter how horrendous of a loss that was. None of their losses matter. They are always going to be called quality losses. Look how they kept out Syracuse. By the committee standard, KU beat 3 ranked teams in a row. They should be in. Let's call an ace and a spade, man. That is exactly what they are advocating at this point. Again, the SEC as a whole, teams that have beat them have a combined win percentage of 72%. That is in the other Power 3 conferences, and that is excluding the fact that Notre Dame beat Texas A&M. The teams that the SEC as a whole have beat in the other power conferences have a combined win percentage at this point of 45. They're manipulating the numbers. Well, they've got 13 wins and only 6 losses. Come on now. Okay, great. Look at who they've beat and look at who they've lost to. There's a complete dynamic shift when you actually look at the numbers for what they really are. And it's a manipulation on behalf of ESPN, on behalf of Fox. Folks, let's not forget that the SEC only had one team, that didn't schedule an FCS opponent, and that was Texas. The Big Ten at least led all the NCAA, especially the power conferences, in least amount of teams that scheduled an FCS opponent. Notably, Penn State and Ohio State. There are no favors being done right now. And Miami may have easily walked themselves out. What will be their saving grace is if Texas beats Georgia. And even then, I don't know that they would keep Georgia out. I think they would just boost up Alabama, and then they would just bring Georgia back a few spots, and they would be 11, and then Alabama would pick up and take where Georgia originally was. But that's legitimately probably the only hope. That or maybe Iowa State losing, Arizona State. I mean, it's 50-50 at this point whether or not a Big 12 team is going to get in. I think they will. I don't think you're going to see Army in there. And predicated upon where the Big 12 is sitting right now, either one of those teams win, then I think they're probably in. I mean, because there are no ties in college anymore, right? I mean, believe it or not, that was a thing. So, you know, but even then, it wouldn't surprise me for the committee to leave out a Big 12 team, depending on how the game gets played out. If it's a tight game, it's close, it goes to a lot of overtimes, I wouldn't be surprised to see one of those Big 12 teams get left out for another SEC team, and I'm just keeping it a buck. I'm not saying that's what I want. I'm not saying that's what I would do. I'm saying so far I've been pretty much able to predict exactly how the committee is going to do things, and pretty much it's exactly how it's gone. I've had some errors here and there, but for the most part, especially with Alabama, I've been able to figure out their little game. You know, they're just the little leading everybody down the hole, aren't they? It's still big business, and they are going to do whatever it takes because every one of these people have an invested interest, and that's all there is to it. That is whether anybody likes it or not. Speaking of which, obviously, championship weekend, it's nothing but big games for college football really at this point. And that's literally, I mean, this is your shot, which, by the way, it's bizarre to me that everybody's talking about it, but the committee is supposed to not even be using the championship game as a tiebreaker or whatever the case may be. But regardless, obviously you got UNLV, Boise State. I think the winner of that game still probably gets in. UNLV has been able to impress. Obviously, they had the quarterback situation early on. They made the switch. They've been doing just fine. They win. I think they're in. Boise State, they win. They're obviously in. They're clearly in. They hung in with Oregon at the beginning of the season. They may have lost that game, but Genty still performed. They proved that they can hang with anybody in the country. If so facto, they win. They're in. That's just all there is to it. Army with an outside shot. Just talked about Iowa State and Arizona State. I think Iowa State is going to have to pound the football, control the clock. If they let Arizona State stay on the football field, eventually the passing game is going to be too much for them. Penn State and Oregon, look, either one of those teams, whether they lose or not, I think they're both going to be in. The Big Ten could potentially legitimately see Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, and Indiana on the college football playoff. Do I think it's too much? Maybe. I mean, Ohio State hasn't completely worked their way in yet. And if Penn State loses that football game, they have a loss to Ohio State. So, again, opportunity to move in potentially another SEC team. If I'm a Big 12 fan, I'm hoping that my favorite team or my team from the Big 12 wins by a blowout, and that's going to at least give us a shot in the college football playoff. And I'm honestly rooting for an Oregon win just to completely shut out somebody from the Big Ten, because I don't know that they're going to let in 4 teams. It's a possibility, but you never know. Clemson, SMU, obviously Miami. I think Miami needs Georgia to lose, and I think they also need Clemson to lose as well, just to make double sure, because you still have Miami hanging around with only 2 losses. You would have 2 losses for SMU now, and I think Clemson would get a big enough boost with that win that they would potentially end up in the college football playoff. Because, again, it's the highest-ranked conference champions. So I think SMU would be moved all the way out. Clemson would move ahead. So the ACC still could potentially get 2. They're not going to get 3 in. You're not going to see Miami, SMU, and Clemson in, even with a Clemson win. I just don't think it's logically going to happen. Again, it would be an opportunity for Miami to move up or another SEC team. And if I'm SMU, I am chucking the football all over the field. I am trying to get up 50-0 at halftime and putting that thing away, period. I'm not worried about running the football, even though Clemson's run defense isn't that strong. I'm going to test that jaw early and often with the passing game, and I'm dead ass. All right, real quick here. The 49ers, first of all, I want to know where everybody is that told me Brock Purdy was good enough to carry that football team without Christian McCaffrey. I have gone over this again and again and again. The year that they got Christian McCaffrey, they were 2-3 at that point. He was in for a couple of plays because he just joined the team on Saturday. They lost that football game to the Kansas City Chiefs. They were 2-4 at that point. And from then on, they didn't lose another football game. And do not forget that for the first, 4 wins in a row, Jimmy G was the quarterback. And what exactly is he doing now in the NFL? So we see what happens when you don't have him. You had a win over the Jets early on in the season. I don't know how that win was going to impress anybody. It didn't impress me. Ocho Cinco said he was more impressed by the Jets in that loss than he was the 49ers. I don't see how that was a thing. Both teams aren't really that good. Obviously, the Jets are terrible. But for me, the main thing is, though, I get to a point where I actually feel bad for C-Mac. I really do. One of the best running backs, not only of this era, but probably of all time. And he just cannot stay healthy no matter what he does. And I think they made a huge mistake, and they brought him back way too quickly. If I was C-Mac, I would have sat this entire season out. You couldn't have paid me enough to put me back in that football game. And the tweet that he sent out isn't ominous to me in any way, but reading it, it did have that feel that he is battling internally with retirement. I really think he is probably going to take this time right now to see how he feels going into the offseason. I really think C-Mac is debating on whether or not he's going to retire from football. I don't know that he feels like he can keep going this way. And let's be honest, the 49ers are an organization that has no qualms about moving on from anybody. Don't believe me? Ask Alex Smith. I'm not going to get into the whole Kaepernick situation. That thing is long and done and over with. What I'm saying is they were a 7-1 football team before he got hurt. They ended up sticking with Cap, and Alex Smith ended up going to the Kansas City Chiefs. They are not beyond it. Jim Harbaugh, look what he did for that franchise. They started to backpedal just a little bit, and they said, we're done. They moved on from him immediately. And it might not only be a Christian McCaffrey thing, it might be a Shanahan thing at this point. The 49ers, I think, when this season is over, they are going to have a lot that they need to reevaluate. I really don't know that with what they have going on right now, that they really truly believe that with Shanahan at the helm, especially if there's no C-Mac, that they can move forward and win a championship. Still a solid defense, still a pretty good overall football team. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they gave Brock Purdy maybe one more season. And then after that, moved on from him. There's a lot of decision-making that has to happen right now with the 49ers. And I'm just keeping it a buck. But for me, the bottom line is I feel bad for C-Mac. What he could be is so much different, or would be so different, if he could just stay healthy. If he was healthy right now, we would be talking about him, Saquon, and Derrick Henry. It would be a massive debate on who the best running back in the NFL is. Massive. Look at the turnaround with the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts, trigger happy, turning the football over a lot, especially at the beginning of the season, that game against Green Bay. To me, that was symptomatic of who Jalen Hurts is. But they kept with it with Saquon, and then when people complained that he didn't get the football enough in another loss, I think they listened. Whether anybody wants to admit to it or not, I think they went back and said, okay, how can we incorporate Saquon a little bit more? I know the Ravens are kind of struggling right now, but Derrick Henry still having an MVP season to me, Lamar still doing pretty good, but a couple of bad games to me shouldn't take him out of the MVP talk. But the point is, I think all three would potentially be in the MVP discussion all at once, and it's great for the game because running backs, excuse me, to me, still make such a huge impact. I have been screaming for years that running backs are still a serious part of any football team at any level, and I love that it's being proved. But the problem is, though, is without Christian McCaffrey to help continue to corner the market, it's still going to make the sell real tough despite what Saquon and Derrick Henry are doing. It really is. Even what Nick Chubb, what he's been doing in the past with the Cleveland Browns, the way that he did not get enough credit for helping carry that football team, it's really unfortunate because I think the running back position to me is still the second most important position in all of football. I really do. And honestly, I've said before over and over again that I think the center is the most important position in football, then the running back, and then the quarterback, because let's be honest, if you have a quarterback who's just capable, if you've got the right pieces around him, he could take you really far. Now, there are quarterbacks out there that make or break football teams, right? Aaron Rodgers, years ago, we saw it with the Green Bay Packers. What was it, 2017, if I remember correctly? They had a record for the most injuries inside of the first 4 weeks of the NFL season, and they were still an undefeated football team because Aaron Rodgers. There are very few game breakers, though, at quarterback. Tom Brady, John Elway, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers in his prime, they're not just hanging around every street corner. I know it seems like they are, but they are not. They are really, truly few and far in between. 49ers with a lot of decisions to make. Speaking of a decision to make, rumor has it that old Belichick is thinking about coaching at North Carolina. Mac Brown. Yeah, look, here's my thing. Number one, again, without Tom Brady, he has a losing record. Number two, we've already seen what happened with Michigan and Connor Stallions and that whole thing. If he thinks he's going to go in there and videotape practices, man, does he have another thing coming. And finally, and to me, this is actually the biggest part of this, I really don't think Bill Belichick is loosey-goosey enough to coach college football. I don't. College football is like the ultimate party atmosphere, man. And I know there's already jokes out there about the girls dating and all that stuff. But the point of what I'm saying is he runs too tight of a ship. And I know that a university would love that because you want somebody to keep your kids in check, right? We don't want them out partying all the time. We don't want them hanging around certain individuals. We want somebody who's going to build a lot of structure. And if he goes there, let's all be honest about this one thing, that defense is going to skyrocket right to the top. I mean, for everybody's blustering, including my own, about Bill Belichick, look at what he did with the New York Giants. Cleveland, the defense was okay over there. The New England Patriots, I mean, how many people have said that Tom Brady was carried by a defense? I don't buy that, but let's be clear. The defense was always phenomenal with Bill Belichick. One of the greatest defensive minds in the history of football, period. I mean, that's just period. That alone right there will easily get him into the Hall of Fame. If it wasn't for the Super Bowls and all that, even though I still believe Brady carried him, which is the other thing, the recruiting aspect. It's so much more difficult now with the transfer portal. It's bigger than free agency. At any level, whether it's the NBA, the NHL, the NFL, the MLB, it's bigger than that now. And it's bigger than that because you've got over 130 teams in Division I college football. Then, of course, you've got, the subdivisions and all. I mean, it's inexplicable. You can't really define to me in any specific terms how gigantic the transfer portal truly is. And with the college football playoff, it makes it even more difficult because in December, man, people are going to have decisions to make. If you don't believe that, I'm waiting for that to happen. We're going to see symptoms of that in this college football playoff expansion. Believe you me. I don't know. I don't think this is Bill Belichick's MO. And even then, it would also, on top of everything else, it would be a demotion. It would be a demotion because you've literally won at the highest level. And regardless of what anybody tries to say, including himself, about whether or not he's wanted to coach with the Cowboys or the Falcons or any other football team out there, let's be clear. Nobody has hired him. If anybody thought that Bill Belichick was that good of a football coach and was not didn't have any type of risk factor, then absolutely he would have had a job by now. North Carolina is a program that is desperate to be relevant. They are seeking something, and they've had so many problems in the past with, the paper classes and all that stuff that's happened over there at that university. They need somebody to come in that gives them a good image, the structure that I was talking about a little bit ago, a great defense, and will help you win a national championship. But how does it look for Bill Belichick to literally take a step down? Do not forget, Mike Tomlin was asked very clearly about collegiate jobs, and he said, I have one of the best jobs in all of professional football. Why would I want to coach college football? He took it as disrespect because to everybody who's been in the NFL, they know that it is a major demotion to not be able to find work in the NFL and have to take a coaching college job. Chip Kelly comes directly to mind. Now, some of them have been able to turn it around, right? You had Nick Saban. He didn't work out in the NFL, and how many people were making fun of him? Now, obviously, Alabama went on the run that they did, so he was able to silence that. But initially, that was not how everybody looked at it. They looked at it like, man, this dude can't cut it in the NFL. That's why he's back coaching college football. But even then, you could still say, despite all of his success at Alabama, he was never cut for the NFL cloth. I don't think Bill Belichick, if he took that job, it would be a good look for his legacy. Now, whether or not he gives a damn about it, who the hell really knows? I think more people care about it than admit to. Look at Bron. I mean, he's always talking about his legacy. I think it would be a major demotion. But whether or not he can leave the game alone, who knows? I personally have enjoyed watching him break down plays. But it's his life. It's his career. He's going to do what he wants to with it. But I just know that this is how it's going to get viewed. So there are just so many layers to that decision that I don't know that Bill Belichick makes a move right away. But he's going to have to because, let's be honest, if he doesn't take it by here in a week or so, I mean, if this whole thing is true, North Carolina's got to hurry up and get to it because the transfer portal is coming up. They also understand that transfer portal does carry an advantage with him because of his NFL connections. It's 50-50 on whether or not it would work. I personally don't think that it would. I personally think it would be seen as a demotion regardless of how successful he could potentially be. But even then, I just don't think it would work. There's just too many rules and structures and things that he would have to follow in the NCAA that I don't see it working out. I really don't. If he did it he probably has one really good season where they win maybe 10, 11 games or something like that, potentially sneak their way into the college football playoff. But then after that, I would see just a dramatic dip, and they would never be able to capture it. I mean, look what happened with Charlie Weiss, right? One of his guys. Charlie Weiss couldn't cut the mustard at Notre Dame. Everybody always said that his best victory was a close loss against USC, regardless of whether or not you view the shove by Matt Leinart with Reggie Bush at the end of that game. Doesn't matter. He didn't do anything when he was at KU. He hated being there. The fans didn't really like him. It just, there's so many more variables with college football in terms of how you have to do things, the practices, the schooling itself, the recruiting violations, the recruiting rules. I personally don't see it happening. Again, Herm Edwards didn't work out with him, right? Wasn't really great in the NFL, but he wasn't terrible. Literally did nothing at Arizona State. And I love the guy, but he did nothing while he was there. Part of it was I think he was too outspoken. His players couldn't handle it. Professional guys, maybe they can. College football players, what do you mean when you say that, man? What do you mean we didn't play good and we'll take it and all that? I mean, Eagles are fragile at any age, but regardless, we'll see what happens, I guess, right? All right, everybody, I am Drew Duncan. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. And wherever you listen to the podcast, so your device will play Drew Duncan. Guys, have a great rest of your night and or day. Be safe. Take care of yourselves.